It's great to be back again, and it's a wonderful pleasure that I have to announce some speakers from Autodesk because I've been using Autodesk Maya for over 6 years now, and I'm very pleased to introduce Roland, technical specialist from Autodesk. Roland?
Hello all together. Can you hear me? Wonderful. Hello all together. My name is Roland Reyer. I'm the technical specialist, the Maya guy, actually based in Germany at Autodesk Media Entertainment. And today I would like, can you hear me? Yeah. Today I would like to show you some of the new features and improvements in Maya 2020.
Amazing. So we are going to make a break for 30 seconds so Roland can switch his screen and we can start with the presentation.
So in Maya 2020, there's a bunch of new features and improvements. It is not as much as you may have experienced in the past. With the Autodesk subscription model, we try to make releases every year, but not with a big chunk of new features in one portion, but new features over the pace of the year. So during the year, you will see more features and improvements be added to Maya 2020, but it's still going to be Maya 2020. So we will not break the API until we have a new version number like Maya 2021. So it's not a problem to install a new version or, install the updates and bug fixes. And so your pipeline will be safe. Everything should be working as usual. So that is the idea behind this new release cycle of Autodesk Maya. So what's new in Maya? So I've split this up into a few categories like general modeling, texturing, and two things that are missing in this list here is Arnold and Bifrost. So in the presentation that we did for our reseller partners, we split this up between myself and my colleagues. So one colleague was doing Arnold and the other one was doing Bifrost. That's why it's missing from the scene here. But as you can see in the next slide, I have some information about Arnold for you as well. So let's have first a general look at the whole thing. So the general improvements, Arnold and Bifrost, we will come in a few seconds to that. Amongst the general things are small things like, there's a tutorials link in the help menu. The outliner performance has been improved, which sounds like a really minor thing, but in very large scene, you will definitely experience an improvement in the performance. The UV editor has been improved in the performance. And then we have something that you see in these little videos here on the lower right side. The timeline offers you now a way to manage your audio files or your audio clips that you have on the timeline. You can see the waveform here, and you also see that the timeline is much larger. We will come back to this timeline thing in a second. So on the next slide, we start to talk about Arnold 6, the release of Arnold 6. So the biggest thing here is certainly the GPU rendering, which came out of beta now. So it's no longer in the beta state. You can really use it now. Then we have a unified renderer between the two. So the CPU and the GPU renderer are the same. So the code is basically the same. When you render when you render images with these two renderers, you will get the same results. So it's not a huge difference. It might be a pixel-wide difference between the two renderers, but you can definitely use both renderers to render your shots, for example, and stick them together. Then we have some USD components in Arnold that are important, and of course, like always, we have improved the performance and improved the memory usage of Arnold in this version 6. So please don't read this text here that's not meant to be read. I just could not make up my mind which line to include in this thing here. So I copy and pasted the whole bunch of improvements into this slide. So things that are important are, for example, there is this binary or this Boolean shader that allows you to stick objects into other objects, and these objects will be a cutout. So instead of ruining your geometry, you simply do it in the shader itself. So this shader can be swiped through any kind of object and will be a Boolean operation that you can animate and you can use for just the rendering. That's the super cool thing here. There's a new, I don't go too much into detail. It's too much smaller stuff that's in there. Let's talk about the big things here. The USD integration in Arnold has begun. So we have now USD procedural. You can use a stand-in object in Arnold to load a USD file. So that's what you see here in the image. Here on the right side, the little red circle is the USD file that was loaded here. That's an example scene from Pixar. It's public domain. You can load it from Pixar to play around with it. And here you see that in the attribute editor, you can dive into the USD file and check out the numerous objects that are in there. When you select them here, you will also see the selection in Maya directly. So in the viewport, you will have a feedback in wireframe, at least, what this USD object is. And you can, depending on the type of object, you can add parameters here. So you can add things like translation, rotation, scaling to these objects. You can even assign shaders to these objects and change material attributes and stuff like that. So you can fiddle around with the USD scene, basically. You don't need to be the guy who builds that together. That's not the purpose of this. But you can certainly be the guy who changes smaller things that are just for this shot. You don't want to go back all the way in the pipeline and change it. You just want to change it just for now, and you can do exactly that in this thing here. It's all open source. You can have a look at it at GitHub, Autodesk Arnold USD. You will find the complete thing, which is super cool. Okay, next step is Arnold GPU rendering. As I said, it's no longer in beta. It's now a full release. You have things like on-demand texture loading and faster procedural updates, etc., etc. So it really works nice. I've tried it out on my laptop here. So this relatively simple demo scene from the Arnold website renders in the full quality on my laptop in 13 to 14 minutes, right? That's pretty slow, actually. So after 12 minutes, you could already say, come on, it's good enough. So let's stop the whole thing. On the GPU of my laptop, which is already a Quadro card, it renders in 5 minutes and a little bit. So that is significantly faster. 2 to 3 times faster. And the bigger the scene is, the more advantage you have with the GPU. Now, it's not the goal to render with a cheap GPU on your laptop. The actual goal is to render with a full-blown GPU like these RTX cards here. I have an RTX 6000 on my laptop in an external housing, so I can use that. It's just plugged in via USB-C cable. I can use that for rendering, actually. I could even use that for display, of course, but I'm using it for rendering, and that is a fantastic thing here. When you look at this video, this explains how the whole thing works. So this is software rendering. It starts inside of that image here. From the inner to the outer, you see the tiles being rendered and the noise being removed. I can switch this to IPR, and then when I move the camera here, you see that the renderer starts immediately to re-render that image from the coarsest level on. So it jumps back to coarse pixelated level every time you move it. And it's a little bit, to be honest, it's a little bit jumpy. When I move the camera around, it's no big fun with that CPU. But it's a laptop, right? So it's still pretty good. The whole rendering speed and the whole quality is not so bad. So I've stopped it here, and I'm going into the settings to switch to GPU. And in the list down below here, you can see that my RTX 6000 is hooked on. And when I go to IPR, you see the rendering speed of the RTX 6000, which is significantly faster. So when I move the camera here, it's really smooth. And even though it starts from a very coarse level of pixelated image, it's really, wow, that's a lot of fun to have this rendering. The good thing is the larger your scene is, I mean, this is just a small scene with one car and really optimized. There's no interior that you would not see. So if you have a larger scene, like a very complex scene, this rendering is a lot of fun for all look developers and so. And you can then even go and switch and turn on the denoising on the graphics card. And here in the layers, you would find a denoised layer. When you turn that on, after 2 seconds or so, you already have an image where there's no noise anymore. And that is a lot of fun to adjust lights and positions of lights. And so you can see everything in the final rendered version. Fantastic. That's a lot of fun. And finally, this is actually a slide from my Maya presentation. In lighting and rendering in Maya itself, we improved a lot. So for example, down here in the render setup, you will see new features that work right now. And then in the light setup, you will see new stuff that is working right now. So there's a constant improvement of things that some of our users, for example, also suggest. And you can do that yourself. I hope you know how to use the items in the help menu of Maya to report bugs, for example, or wishes and ideas. Next thing is Bifrost, the extension of Bifrost. This extension of Bifrost is called extension because the actual Bifrost that we had before is a simplified version in Maya 2 and 3ds Max as well, to create water effects. You know, any kind of liquid simulation with foam on the waves and stuff like that is simplified in Maya. You can do it there. But this kind of stuff, set dressing, for example, you know, make landscapes with plants, that is not that simple, and that is what the extension is about. So here's more examples for this set dressing functionality. This one here, there's no real geometry. It's actually all done in Bifrost, completely from within that system. And this is what it looks like, you know, to build this kind of effects together. We have a node system where you plug nodes together in the Bifrost editor. And these blue boxes around, or these gray boxes around the nodes, are what we call compounds. A compound is a collection of nodes that you collapse together, and then again is a node. So some of these nodes here, I hope you can see my mouse pointer, some of these nodes here have a special icon below, which is a compound. So this node has more nodes inside, and you can dive deeper, some levels deeper into it to if you want to change this node network and adapt it to your own needs. But you can also use this compound system to simplify your work. Once something is running and working, you can collapse the whole branch of these nodes and concentrate on the bigger picture. Also in Bifrost extension, what's already working are things like fire and beautiful explosions and aerial simulation, like this smoke trail here on the car. You can do all of that in a simplified manner by opening a browser in Maya and drag and drop an effect into Maya, and then simply hook it up to your own objects and to your own scene. Things like the cloth simulation that you see here, there was an animated character underneath this cloth object here, or this one here, you can see how stable this whole thing is. When we twist it and twist it and twist it, and still works, right? So it does not stick together or anything. And then finally, this MPM solver thing. MPM means that you have an effect that is partially like particles, but also like clumps of particles that stick together. Snow is a good example, or wet sand, or stuff like that, or earth and moss, and so that would be an example of this for this MPM solver, and that allows you to do all kinds of effects in the Bifrost extension. Something that you can also do is to work on retopology. This is an example here that uses a new feature in the Maya modeling. We will come there in a second. But you can also do something like that in Bifrost directly and use scanned objects like on the left here and turn them into a proper geometry. And finally, the Bifrost extension can also be used for rigging. So there are ways to use this node network for rigging of characters, for procedural weighting, for example, for deformers, for special kind of deformers, a snap deformer in this example here, or a proximity deformers, all this kind of stuff, up to the point where the whole skinning becomes topology independent. So here's again the proximity, and here's the example for topology independence, which means we have a deformer that works in space along the skeleton, but the geometry underneath does not matter at all. So that works independently from that geometry. Okay, so from Bifrost, let's jump into the modeling part of it. This is my slide for modeling, and the two functions that are picked from here that are the biggest improvement in modeling currently are this remesh and retopologizing. So let me jump into Maya and show you some of this remesh and retopologize feature. So what I've loaded here in Maya is a piece that I made from some simple or with some simple Boolean operations. So I simply stuck a cylinder into another cylinder and something just from the side through it, and then a box through the whole thing, and subtracted these shapes from each other. What you get are problematic faces like this concave face with multiple edges. So the idea is to have only faces with four-sided edges, especially in the games development, because these are the ones that shade the fastest. And let's say I want to retopologize this thing to get the proper geometry. The one thing that I can do here, let me hold the shift and right mouse button, is to use the remesh function that will cut everything into smaller pieces. So here you can use the maximum edge lengths in this in-view editor here to make smaller triangles and cut this into smaller and smaller pieces, so small that you actually end up with something that is more like let's say like a scan or so. But for now, let's go back to the larger size of the triangles, because this resembles the shape good enough. If you don't like this topology because you want to do something with a more regular topology, you can also go and shift right mouse button and retopologize this thing again. Retopologize, you see that here already, will do some weird things like smoothen some of these edges. So for example, I can go into that node, the retopo node, and say, hey, I want some more polygons, let's say 2,000 polygons instead of just 1,000 polygons. And I want to preserve my hard edges, definitely, because it was more like a technical thing. So now with the preserve hard edges, I find, okay, I can go back to 1,000 edges and use this one here. And this, funny edges that you see here can be controlled with this slider, the anisotropy. If you turn down anisotropy, you will get a much more regular mesh that you can really use to further edit the mesh. And so you could now go and select edges, for example, and double click on these edges and then shift right mouse button to delete these edges to end up with four-sided polygons all around this object. So here are some extra edges, this one here and this one, oops. And this one here, selected one too many, this one was too many. So shift and delete those. So I end up with just four-sided polygons that are, have all a similar size and so. Here's another example for this remesh and retopologize functionality. This is an object from the included model library in Maya. You find that in the content browser. And I use the remesh function to do a really fine mesh, very much like a scan. Imagine you had a scan like this, and now you want to retopologize and get a proper polygon object out of it. That would take a long time. And you see here in the construction history, I've deleted all the construction history. There's nothing there. So I simply right mouse button and do a retopologize on this model. And after a few seconds, you will see that it, creates a real nice topology. Come on, do it. So here's the real nice topology. And actually, I should go in and increase the number of polygons a little bit, because on the wings of that wasp, you see that there should be a little bit more topology, especially in this area here. So now we have a beautiful topology of this object by just, 2 clicks basically into this scanned-like geometry, and we have a super regular topology that I could now cut into pieces and mirror if I really need to, or include a skeleton and do some character animation with this, because the topology is already okay. If I had done that by hand, it's sure I used more than an hour to get this topology as we can see it here. So that is a fantastic way to improve the time that you spend on the computer. So let's jump back to our PowerPoint here. Some things that have changed in the substance are what you read here, like batch import and bake to disk in a batch process. So you don't have to bake your textures one by one. You can select them all together and bake them all at once. And stuff like that have been improved in the substance. So check out your substance menu for these news. That's a really interesting thing for all people who use that kind of stuff. In the rigging area, there are some interesting developments. So one thing that you can see here is, for instance, a hotkey that many people asked for to toggle or to cycle the visibility of control objects in character animation. This game, when you do character animation, you have all these control objects floating around the character, and you have to either deal with visibility layers or with visibility of groups and so, and it's always a mess to get this right. And in Motion Builder, for instance, there is a hotkey for that. So Alt-A toggles the visibility of skeletons and control objects in 3 states. So it's an invisible and also hidden from polygons. So polygons can hide this stuff. Polygons would hide the skeleton inside. So these 3 states can be toggled by Alt-A. Check this out. In the lower section of the screen, you see a new deformer. That is the proximity wrap deformer, and a proximity pin deformer is also there. Let me show these two first. And let me load this example here. So when we talk about the proximity pin deformer, you see this head here has a little, or I placed a little cone here close to the head. So and what I want to do now in my deforming or in the rigging menus, I want to do a proximity pin deformer. And you see here, my cone jumps a little bit. I have this this locator here as my control object for the cone, and with this locator I can move the cone around in relation to this default geometry. Now when I start to modify the geometry, let's say I pick a vertex here and turn on the soft modification, then you see what the proximity pin does. And you also see that, a locator stays where it is. But with that locator, I can define, the position of that cone relative to the default position of my geometry. So when I go back to this one here and move it around, you see, what the proximity pin does. It keeps the orientation, and it's super easy to apply, so you don't have to do anything extra to be able to pin something to such a geometry. So let me just undo that until this goes away. Okay, so we don't need the cone any longer. That was the proximity pin that lets you pin things onto geometry. Another thing is the proximity wrap deformer. So let's say we have this geometry of the guy, and we want to deform the geometry with a simple object, maybe like this sphere. I mean, the ideal would be something like a very simplified, very basic kind of face shape that allows you to take the area of the eyes or the eyebrows or so and modify those. But let me show you on this one here. When you end up with a situation like this, that your control objects hide everything, you can easily create a new Lambert shader, for example, make this transparent, right? So now once it's selected, you can see it. When it's not selected, it goes away. That's a cool thing. You can also, if you want to see it all the time, you can go into Smooth Mesh Preview and turn this on and say, I want to see the cage and the smooth mesh. This is similar to hitting the 2 key. 1 is no smooth mesh, 2 is both the cage and the smooth mesh, and 3 is just the smooth mesh. So I leave the cage on and turn the subdivisions to 0. Now the cage and the smooth mesh are the same. And now it leaves a wireframe when it's not selected, which is a cool way to have, a wireframe of your control objects, but you can click them by just, clicking on the surface of the thing. So what I actually wanted to show is the proximity wrap deformer, which you find in the deform menu over here. And this is a special workflow that we have here. When I do that proximity wrap with my deformed object, I get this proximity wrap node, and there's an edit node button here. This edit node button opens this window here, and you see that under geometry, which is the deformed geometry, I have the head shape already registered. I could pick other objects and register them as well. I don't have a driver selected here. So what's absolutely necessary for the driver is to say, I want to delete the history. I've done that with a hotkey. And I also want to freeze transforms. You have to freeze transforms. Otherwise, when you add the driver, it would, apply the modification, or, it would apply its transformations already to this object. Okay, so now I have this sphere as a driver, and the effect is when I pick one of these faces here, that I can deform my geometry with this kind of free-form lattice point. What I have to do here, let me close this. I can open it again. So let's go back to the proximity wrap and increase the smooth influence and smooth normals. Now have a look at this region here, at the deformed region. When I smooth the influence, you see this is the effect of smooth influence. And the same with smooth normals. So this makes everything a little bit more looking nice, basically. It's much slower now. Can't see it when I modify it here, but the end effect of it is that it would be much slower. Not a big deal, but you see we have a very nice and smooth deformation of the surface. So this is usually the moment when you find that, I forgot to deform something. So for example, my character has eyebrows and I wanted to deform them. I just forgot them because they were not visible. So what do we do now? We have to undo everything and then make the eyebrows visible, and then we have to redo everything. No, this is not that bad anymore. So I can go back to the proximity wrap here and open this window again with the drivers and the geometry. I can say, hey, this new geometry that I have here, I want to include it. So I add this selected object. Now look at the eyebrows, what happens to them? Boom, they get deformed immediately. So this new drive or this new driven object is included in the whole deformation and gets deformed immediately. So your work when you have built a blend shade, for example, or build a deformed face with this deformer is not lost. You can simply edit it with this kind of a new workflow. Okay, so let's jump back into the PowerPoint. So we have seen the proxy wrap deformer and the proximity pin, and now to the first part of this here, which is the offset parent matrix. I think you, or as a rigger, you certainly have heard and maybe even used matrices in Maya. A matrix is a sequence, or is is kind of a spreadsheet of numbers 4 by 4, which expresses the translations, rotations, and scaling and shear of an object. So with such a matrix, you have some things much easier than with the single channels translate, rotate, scale, and the calculation of matrices is much faster. Because to calculate transformation, rotation, scaling, I have to, take the values from the matrix and turn them into something human readable. And then the human changes it and turns it back into a matrix, or Maya turns it back into a matrix, which takes time. So let me show you an example that illustrates what I mean here. Or first, the problem that we have. I have some objects here. So this, how shall we call it here, a wrench or something. This object here is not connected to the blue sphere, and this one is also not connected to the blue sphere. I have an animation that is so that this object comes in. It is supposed to bring the blue sphere to the stage, and then the other one comes and wants to pick up the blue sphere and move it away. Okay, that's my animation idea. The first thing that I can do is to say, hey, this object, I want to parent it to this one here. I hit the P key for parent. You can see it here. Parent, it's P. And then this object or this blue sphere follows the object on the right side. Okay? And then I can say, hey, this other object and the sphere will be connected by a constraint, a parent constraint. Does exactly that. It moves the object around. I can even rotate everything, and this sphere would follow. Unfortunately, this breaks the other one. Okay? And not only that, also parent constraints are slow. There is a whole bunch of connections involved, and it's really not nice to work with these parent constraints, because also once this object is constrained here, the workpiece, its translate and rotate are blocked by the constraint, as you can see here. I can move it around, but as soon as I move this constrained object, it jumps back into the constrained position. So all in all, not very nice. So let me undo that until the whole parent constraint here is undone and the object is no longer constrained to it. It's still constrained to the parent object. Maybe something that I didn't show. The parent relation is broken. Once I did the parent constraint, this parent-child relation does not work anymore. So what do? There is a way, in fact, to use these two objects here. I open my node editor, and by the way, I have my own marking menu here on the left side that opens some windows for me that I would have to otherwise open from the Windows menu here. So in this window here, you see the two objects that I've selected, the claw on the left and the workpiece, that's the blue sphere. And the claw on the left has this matrix output, which is all translation, rotation, scale in one thing. And I can plug it into an offset parent matrix of this child object of my workpiece. This attribute is not yet there. I have to create it first by using this window here. So we get down here, offset parent matrix. Now it's there. Here you see the plug. So I've simply did this one plug. from matrix into a matrix. And what happens now is that my workpiece now follows the second controller, the left control object, but also the right control object at the same time, which is really funny. So I can move this around, and I can move this around, and I can move this around, and the sphere will follow. And I can even move the sphere around, and it will still follow both objects without any jumping. Is that cool or is that cool? So that's a very cool thing. As I said, as a rigger, you've done that before. You also notice that for the sphere, there's nothing blocked because we just use the the matrix thing, and there are nodes to calculate with matrices, to multiply, subtract, add, and stuff, and choose. For example, if you just want to extract the translation from the matrix, you can do that as well. So now my animation is going to work. So here comes the parent object. That's simple parenting that we have here, brings the sphere in. The other object is moving in this example, but this is the parent movement. So the movement of this group, right? You see here, these two attributes are animated of the group, and this will not be inherited to this through this matrix, which is very cool. So now I can move the object by using the group, and then from here, I'm animating the object itself, and this will grab the sphere and move it away. It's just one connection, the matrix to the offset parent matrix of the blue sphere, that allows me to do that stuff. Before that, it was a nightmare with all the channels of the constraints. Awful. So that makes life a lot easier. Now I leave this open because I want to later also have a look at this stuff concerning, let me jump back into this one, concerning the graph editor. Before we do that, let's talk about the evaluation toolkit. In a demo last year, I've shown how you can use the evaluation toolkit to find out what takes long in your scene. And this is now properly documented, so you don't have to guess by the length of a bar here what it is. It's properly documented, so you have a better idea where to look and how to act on these nodes when your scene is slow. Also, the scene lint window is now properly documented. This window allows you to run an analysis and then fix things like flat animation curves, do that all at once without you going through the scene and fix it one by one. You can let the automatic mechanism do all of that. And here's what I was talking about in the rigging session. The animation in the timeline has changed a lot. So let's jump back into Maya and have a look at the timeline stuff. So what you can do now with the timeline is to just increase the size like so. You just grab it by the handle here and increase the size. That is very user-friendly. Another thing that you can do is when you select some frames, I'm holding the Shift key here and use my left mouse button to select some frames. You can right mouse button then and make time slider bookmarks. So I create a time slider bookmark with a certain color. Let's use this reddish here and call it, let's say, Roland. Okay. And create it. So what you see then here is this time slider bookmark thing in the time slider itself. I then select another region, and you can even use overlapping regions and create another one. I could use the Alt-T hotkey to do that. So this one here, I want to be green color. This has my last name on it. That's my next bookmark here. And let me do a third one. Now let me use the Alt-T as a bookmark. This one's going to be pink, and I call it Autodesk, right? And here's my 3 bookmarks. You can also go into a bookmark editor. So the bookmark manager, which is this one here. It allows you to frame on bookmarks, so to set the playback range to these respective bookmarks. So you jump to the red one, to the green one, or to the purple one, for example, and you can unframe, you can frame to everything. And there's even, an unframe hotkey that remembers your last setting. So if you were from 200 to 200 before, or from 0 to 200 before, it jumps back to that. So you can use hotkeys for all of these and, jump back and forth between the bookmarks. And then at the end, if you want to start playback to see everything in context, then you use the unframe hotkey to show your whole timeline. That is a nice improvement to this whole thing. Okay, yeah, one thing that I did not show is the improvements to the graph editor that we've made. You see a lot of things going on there. Sometimes it's tiny. It's a tiny little thing. So, for example, there's a lot about color themes. And you will find something even for colorblind people, which makes some of the users laugh. You wouldn't laugh if you knew that every single one of us is a little bit colorblind in a certain spot. Some people have a better color view and some people don't. So it's not funny at all to give people the ability to change the colors so that they can, they also have a relaxed workday by viewing these colors in their own way, their own way of viewing these color curves. So that is one thing. The display of the keyframes in the curve editor has changed. You can increase or decrease the size of the keyframes so that, with a lot of curves, you maybe want a smaller kind of display of these keyframes, that kind of stuff. It looks like a very small thing, but it helps a lot in the day-to-day work, but you have to use it. You have to go in and have to customize Maya to your own needs so that you can use the full potential of these user interface changes. Animation. What has changed in animation? I have to check the time. You see things like animated image planes work now with cached playback, and everybody's like, what? That's a new feature. Technically, it's really a very complex problem, right? So when we do cached playback, normally you have certain ways to cache this geometry movement to the graphics card, for example, or to cache the calculation of all of these keyframes here. But that has nothing to do with the movie that runs in the background. So there are two different things that are really complex to bring together and to play in sync. So that was a big deal for our engineers to bring that together. That's why it's a big feature. We have dynamic support. Oh, that's an interesting one. So now when you open the scene like this one here, and you see it's already giving me a red warning, cached playback. We are in safe mode because it's disabled. What? I just read that Dynamics is now supported in the cached playback. Why is it not working? So when we look into it here and I right mouse button on this menu, on this button here for the cached playback, there are the cached playback preferences. When you open that, you see that the cached dynamics is turned off by default, which is, no wonder. So as soon as I turn it on, you see this red line appear in my timeline, and that is the cache for this animation. And once it's cached completely, you can play it back in real time. And of course, you can scrub back and forth. Hey, we have a cache. It's fantastic. And it's a super cool thing because now when I start, for instance, and make an object here and bring it into, this collision region, and I tell the object, now you're going to be a passive collider, and you see it instantly starts to recache this whole thing. And I don't have to hit play. I can look, what happens to my collision object here to my whole playback, and I see, oh, it slips over it. So my whole rubbery setting for the cloth is not good. So with this one here, I could go back into the attribute editor and say, hey, let's use one of these preset and add to this rubbery thing here, add some heavy denim, like 50% of heavy denim. And boom, you see it immediately recaches the whole thing. And once it reaches the current frame, it jumps to the position where it would be during the simulation. So now my simulation looks like this. It does not slip over it anymore. And same thing when I, for instance, when I move this collision object, now we are at frame 50. So I move my collision object a little bit further, and then it recaches it. And as soon as it reaches frame 50, I don't have to do anything. Bloop, you see that it jumps into position, and I can see, here's how the collision would be, and I can fine adjust it. And I don't have to play this game anymore, going to play and rewind and set something and play and rewind and set something. I just move the thing around and the cache takes care of it. So I can now hit playback and I see, oh yeah, that's my simulation now, right? And I can scrub back and forth and, check it out and see if I'm happy with it. So that is a big improvement. I love it really because I love to play with animation, with Dynamics animation. And this is the last piece of it. We now have the Rococo mocap library included. And everybody's like, what? What the hell is that? So let me show you what it is. It's actually easy to show and somewhat, for some people, disappointing, so to say. So I'm loading here in the background a scene with a character that this character is quick rigged. So I just selected the geometry and used the function, here you go, use the function quick rig to build a human IK rig for the character and to load this in. So what you end up with is a character like this here that you can move around. Maybe I should go into the human IK panel and switch to full body. So now you have the full rig here, the full body rig, which is not a rig for day-to-day animation. You shouldn't use that for day-to-day animation, but for posing, for example, it's a perfect thing. And it's also a perfect thing for calculating, for playing around with motion and transferring it over to the rig or to the skeleton and in between characters. Now, this motion library here is a library from the company Rococo that lives within Maya. So directly in Maya, I can access these clips here, and it's so that I hover over a clip and it starts playing. Well, cool. I can rotate the clip and look at the animation from all sides. And you see, oh, there's a price attached to it. And that is where people start to be frustrated. Oh, come on. You integrated something so that I can buy from them. Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. Wait a second. First thing, you can sort them by price. So I can click on the price sorting here, and I see the first ones are all 000. They don't cost anything. So there are around 100 motion clips that you can load for free and play around with for free. So here, all these dancing motions, and so that's all free stuff. So let's go back to the beginning here, because in the first frame, I have this flip motion here, for example, that you can see it on the icon. I downloaded it already. So normally you would put it in the basket, in the cart, and then pay for it depending on you can back it up and use that to pay instantly. But this one was free. I downloaded it for free. What I can do here is to import it into Maya directly from here. Look in the outliner. When I click on this, click, here is my new object. This reference object, and now let me close it here. We close this thing. This is the motion that I just downloaded. And the cool thing is, you see the blue line here, that's my animation cache. It plays instantly. And it also, what it has also done here is to adjust my timeline to 120 frames per second, which is too much. I only need 30 frames per second. So let's go and set it to 30 frames per second. So, and then it downsamples the whole thing, and it now works in 30 frames per second. Okay, so here's my jumping guy. If you know Human IK, if you know Maya, maybe even Motion Builder, you know that with my skinned character here, I can use this menu here. This is my quick rig character, and say, instead of the control rig, I want you to be controlled by this new character that I just brought in. What happens now is that the guy jumps to the position of the new skeleton, and now I have this, right? I have this motion here of my character that adapts, or picks up the reference here. And the reference is still active. I can still use this reference here, for example, to move my character around, which would be overridden by animation, of course, but it's still attached to this reference geometry here. So while I play, you see also that the topology of this skeleton is different from what I have in my character. So there's, for example, there's one more spine bone here, and the whole chest construction looks different from my character. But that's the beauty of Human IK. It enables you to transfer animation from this character over to another one and still looks natural and looks nice. Problem with the footsteps? No problem. You can tell Human IK, hey, I want you to use the same footsteps. I don't want you to use the same gesture, but the same footsteps. What you can do now is to tell your quick rig character, the skinned guy here, hey, I want to bake this animation to my control rig. Okay, and it runs through all of these frames and bakes all the keyframes from my Rococo character onto my skinned character. Okay, so here's my control rig now. I can take this reference character and delete it altogether from my scene, so it's gone now, and my skinned character still has the same animation. Boom. Okay, and when you see that here, I don't understand why anybody is frustrated because they have to pay. How long do you want to search the internet for free motion instead of paying $3 or $6? Because most of these animations cost $3 or $6. That's really a super cheap price for an animation like this, where you can start in Maya and just say, hey, throw it at my character. I can move it back and forth between the skeleton and the control rig and another character, as long as they are used here in the Human IK scheme, you can transfer motion back and forth. And once you've purchased it, you can use it for your projects as long as you like. Okay, so that is really a cheap method of doing that with the Rococo motion library. By the way, you will find the window here in the animation section. Here's the Rococo motion library. Okay, you need to be online. It does not download anything, so you need to be online in order to purchase something from there. Okay, so back to our PowerPoint slides here, and I think we are done already. So that was the last one here, the Rococo motion library. And when we go back to the beginning of the presentation, you see we've seen some, general improvements, including Arnold and Bifrost, the Bifrost next generation thing. We've seen modeling, the retopologizing, and or remeshing and retopologizing functions, texturing, that was the substance thing. We've seen some rigging improvements, including the matrix plug on all the nodes that allows you to do super fast and super smart rigs. Then in animation, we have animation caching has been improved with the dynamic stuff, and also the animated background thing. Scene evaluation is now easier because everything is properly documented. And rendering and lighting, you've seen that slide together with the Arnold slide here right after the general session. Okay. So I think we're going to make a small break now and the screen sharing.
Yes.
you're invited to ask questions.
Yes, so we're going to take a 30-second break and we're going to come back. Hi, it was a really nice presentation, and it was really dreadful for us because there was so many new features and amazing ones with the topology, also with the animation cache, and also with the Bifrost. So I'm very happy to see some very much improvements. And I wanted to ask you the first question. I like the library from the animations. So technically, is it it's updated day by day, or it just stays like that?
Well, since it's a commercial offering. It's not by Autodesk. It's from the company Rococo, and it's their duty to say, hey, we want to make good business, so we update it regularly. If you look at the window with all of these motions, all of these motions have a little field telling you the vendor, the actual company that creates these motion clips. So it depends on the companies to upload and offer more of these motion capture clips. So there are companies out there that do nothing else but, recording motion capture. And there is probably on the website of Rococo also a way to ask for certain animations. Maybe not, I need one small snippet for my current project here, and I want you to do that for $6. But if it is something where the vendor could say, hey, that is something that's missing in my collection, then they would certainly do that and offer a new thing. So the intention is to update that and to sort it. So there are certain categories that you can use to filter this, and also keywords or tags, so to say, where you can search for the stuff. So it shouldn't be a problem to update it regularly and to offer new stuff.
Yes, it's perfect. So it's amazing for students to test something out because the library it's free, and it's very good, really. Thanks for the recommendation and also for showing us. So we have a question. You can read it. The complex.
See if I can make it full screen here. So yeah, the unfold algorithm of the UV editor. I have to say, not yet. There have been made improvements to the performance of the unfold algorithm, but not to the algorithm itself. I know that my colleagues are working on a new algorithm. Let's put it so, which is a thing that you have not seen before, or you may have seen it in other products, but this is a completely new way of unfolding something. And it's the intention is to offer you something that is a one-click solution, right? You say, this is the object, unfold it, and you don't think about it. It should do it completely by itself, right? That's all I can say about it right now. That is the plan of the whole thing. So right now, in Maya 2020, there has been no improvement on the algorithm itself. Wait for the future. I can't promise you when it's going to come, but I know that my colleagues are working on it.
We have other question from catchy name 01.
Regarding the parent objects and the parent constraints. So this way of working with matrices works with all transformations. So the offset parent matrix is something that works with all transform objects. So if your constraints or your rig has a transform object, yeah, it works okay. There are other logical problems when you start to get into it and you say, I have one object over here, one other object over here, and the third one over here. All of them should control my object somehow. Then you start to find out by yourself, doesn't make sense in a certain way. So you can do anything. So this, to go away from the normal constraints like point constraint, rotate, and scale constraints is mainly because of speed and because of simplicity. Because when you look at the constraints, what they do with your objects in the node editor, you have a whole bunch, a whole tree of connections between the objects, not from A to B, but also backwards around the corner. And that makes it confusing, but also slow. And this new way of matrices, that is something where we say, hey, we can control an object by another matrix, and that's fine. It's much faster. We don't have to decompose the matrix and recompose it all the time, just because it's split up into 3 separate things. It's just one connection and pipes these 16 values directly into the next object, and you are there already. I talked to riggers who said, I'm doing that since years. I'm not touching point constraints at all. It's such a mess. I don't like that at all. I'm using the matrices altogether. So that is certainly the future, and you will certainly see more of that. So the next question. The rigid body, if indeed it's 3, I don't understand that. Is that a question about the motion capture? What would you say, Stefan?
Yeah, I think it's the quick rig. How do we create it? So I think he missed the present.
Yeah, the quick rig thing. So to rig a character in a single click, that is a feature which sounds a little bit ridiculous. You can find that tutorial how it works on my YouTube channel. So if you Google for YouTube Roland Reyer, you will find a tutorial how to use this quick rig feature and also the limitations. There is 2 of them actually. The first one is without the hands, and then the second one, I've done the same character again. That's with the hands, or shows you how to include the hand character. But you have to read the comments because there was a little thing missing in there on how to properly attach the hands. Because once you attach the hand, you break the human IK thing, so you have to reattach the human IK to make it work properly. So keep that in mind when you do that. But Quick Rig is pretty cool. It does a rigging process in one go, something where I had not believed that it is possible, but it totally works. Hello, my name is Roland. Okay, next question. I saw a couple of GPUs mentioned on the art, and there are no AMD Ryzen. Yes, for the rendering currently it's only NVIDIA cards and only the ones that you've seen there. The RTX is the best one. It will work with GeForce, with certain GeForce cards. Please visit the website arnoldrenderer.com, and there you can read which GPUs are included, but it's not an AMD. Not yet.
Sure. I in the chat room I have placed your video from YouTube for the quick rig. So I hope it answers your questions. So definitely you can check out the YouTube channel and definitely subscribe, because there is a lot of new features, and I'm following that channel for pretty much almost 2-3 years, something like that. So subscribe and follow Roland.
Thank you very much. I can't see that question. Can you scroll up there? Beginner to Myers, if I can say it in there. Yeah. Oh, yes, please.
So question, catchy name. I'm still a beginner to my software. I can say now with a lot of shutdown, it makes me feel like I don't know anything about this. Nice. But can I make my portfolio with the Maya student version and I can get hired and paid with that? I know that the whole software is paid, licensed, but I'm not dedicated enough regarding this.
So as long as you are a student, you can use it to make your show reel or to do any kind of student work, right? So the student version is free as long as you don't do commercial work. So for example, you have a student job and your employer says, "Hey, you have a student version of Maya. Why don't you model me something like that?" The intention is, no, you didn't pay for the software. Please don't use it for commercial work. You can rent a Maya license for a month or so if you have a job, and then then everything is legal again. As long as you are a student, you make your demo reel, and so everything is fine. There shouldn't be a problem. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, nice. So what can we expect into the new feature of Maya for 2021? It's a hard question, I know, but is there any update?
I can't make any announcements, of course, because I would have to do a disclaimer because people would buy based on my promises, and that is especially for an American public company. That's illegal. We cannot promise things that are not on the market and will not be on the market for the next 3 months, and I have no idea what the release date for Maya 21 would be. I know that, or I have seen that we are working on this UV layout thing, for example. I don't know if that's going to be released in Maya 21. I know that we are working heavily on USD stuff, universal scene description. I'm sure you heard about it. Many people are eager to use it in their production pipeline. And, we are working on an integration of USD so that you can load USD files, you can write USD files, edit them, etc., all this kind of stuff. But again, I don't know the release date. I don't know what the features of it will be. We have a beta program at Autodesk, so all of our software can be downloaded as a beta version. You can try to apply if you want to do that. Just look for the website feedback.autodesk.com, and there you can apply to get an account. But I don't have any influence, unfortunately. I can't even make recommendations on what to say or so. So the people who select the people for beta have their own criteria to do that. So beyond that, there will be improvements again and again. Speed is a big thing. You've seen that with the animation, cached animation playback. Speed is a super, super important thing to become faster, which is in the small examples that I've shown, that's never a problem. But when I visit customers with real productions, with big productions, and you see them, sit there for 20 minutes or half an hour to load a scene, and that's already fast, right? We're coming from times in 2015 when that same scene took 2 hours to load, right? That really hurts. That costs a lot of money. So speed, that is one thing that we are working on. And it sounds like, oh, come on, then just make it fast. It's not that easy. So what happens internally in Maya is super complex. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the program. And to speed this up so that you can still receive solid results and solid performance, that's not so easy. So our engineers are at it to get you working faster with better results.
Yes, nice. So technically, yes, when you're using Maya, a lot of problems that are making artists that when they're, let's say, modeling hard surface, I can see all of the plugins are turned on. So definitely, always, if you're a beginner, you should turn them off, like for Bifrost and something like that, so your Maya can get up and ready, and it will be even faster for you, definitely. Also, it was amazing to see from the last versions, the viewport 2. It's really fantastic because there was a lot of new updates for that view, and it was pretty amazing. So can we see something new in the viewport?
There will be work on the viewport definitely related to USD because we want to display things that are not living in Maya actually. So there's a lot going on there. But again, I have not even tested the whole beta version yet to check out what's possible and I'm not working in a production pipeline. I have to also say. So I don't have a huge scene that I can just throw at it and see, how that works. For beginners or for everybody who's working with Maya, my first recommendation would be you can customize it like hell. So whenever you see yourself doing the same thing over and over and over again, that is the moment where you should customize it. Right? When you see yourself go into the same pull down menu over and over and up and down and up and down, and you do the same thing over and over, you are wasting time, of course, and you waste energy. You waste a lot of energy that you could use to build stuff and to play with the model and to play with the design of what you are producing. So go customize it. Maya is perfect for customization. You can rebuild things. You can make your own buttons and make even your own pull-down menus if you like. Pull-down menus are not the best way, but you have a whole hotkey editor where you can say, I don't need all this animation stuff. I'm not animating anyway, so throw it away and build your own stuff. You can't break anything. The Maya defaults are always there. You can always go back to the defaults and say, I need the defaults, but you can build your own stuff and say, here I have a keyboard with 96 keys and I can, on each one of them, I can not only have a function there, I can have a marking menu on each one of these keys. So that is super powerful to customize the user interface and to make sure that you don't waste any time by digging into menus or, folding things open and try to get where you want. You can have it all where it's the fastest way to access them.
Perfect. Thanks for the answer. So we have the last question.
Yeah. The question is there a set amount of polygons supported in the scene or it all depends on the hardware and software. I mean, there might be a number that is too big for the software, right? As far as I know, millions and millions and millions of polygons should not be a problem. It's actually not a problem. It's the software and the hardware, of course, because when you load in something, a huge polygon object, it tries to put it on the graphics card and makes the graphics card display it somehow. There's a limit, of course, where the graphic card says, "Thank you, sorry, I can't digest more." But there is millions of polygons in most cases. You should be aware that the smaller the pieces are, so in Maya, things are objects and shapes and construction history nodes, for example, and deformers, and all of these small pieces eat a lot of memory. So let's say you have, a car, a motor, a combustion motor, consists of thousands of small parts. When I do that, when I model that way, so that every screw is an object in Maya, a transform and a shape, and every nut and every bolt is a transform and a shape, and all the small pieces in the motor are a shape, then you end up with thousands of these shapes, and that makes Maya slow. So if you know that you're not going to open this thing up, throw them away. If you know that you may want to look at them, but you don't want to change anything, try to bake things together. All the things that have the same material are easy to bake together. And even with separate materials or different materials, you can bake them together. When you have one big chunk of 1 million polygon and it's only one object, that would be much faster in Maya.
Perfect. So definitely we have one more question. If you want, you can answer it.
One more question now. Bit technical. What is the minimum requirements for the processor and graphic card for Arnold? I don't know that. So I'm pretty sure there is requirements on the Arnold Renderer website, arnoldrenderer.com. You can look it up. What's the minimum requirement? But that is something you don't want to go with the minimum requirement. Let me put it this way. On most processors today, if you run Windows 10, you would also be able to run Arnold on the processor, and you will pretty soon find out what makes Arnold slow and what costs you a lot of time to sit in front of the machine and wait for the thing. So you want to go with as much processor and much memory and the biggest graphics card that you can afford, because otherwise you sit in front of the machine and wait for it, right? Let's face it, that's it. So you spend more money or you wait. And I know it hurts when you buy a bigger machine or so, but that's a trade with all renderers, by the way. Even if you do one, if you purchase one that is doing only graphics card, for example, that's the same game. The bigger the graphics card, the more memory on it, the faster the renderer. I'm sorry for that.
Yes, definitely. You have to buy a monster machine to run everything, even if for modeling you have to have bigger memory, also for post-production and everything else. But for the basic stuff, I think for testing you should go with minimum of the lowest price, like 1050 NVIDIA Ti. So definitely we have used in our academy and it works perfectly. So for the minimum low budget, I will go with that graphic card.
Yeah, today I have to say, rendering power or CPU power and graphics power is not so much of an issue anymore. So, 10, 15 years ago, it was an issue. Most of the machines were pretty weak. And if you wanted to do something like photorealistic rendering and big textures, some people work in 8K textures all the time, then your machine says, no, sorry, I don't even want to load that thing. I don't even want to look at it. And nowadays, okay, you find ways to do it somehow. You can load things without the textures, with proxy textures that are smaller, just to be able to look at it. So it's no longer such a big issue. Today, I'm doing my presentations on a laptop. As I said, it's a good laptop, no problem. It's an HP machine, a ZBook HP, but it's a laptop. It's not a huge desk side machine that heats up the whole house or so. But I always have to have a look at how much do I load and how much can I slow my machine down until people get bored from my presentations, right? So I have different problems here. When people get bored in my presentation, that's a different point from sitting there and saying, okay, it takes an hour to render, so in that time, that's my lunchtime, for example.
Yes, definitely. Also, I want to share one story. When I was at FMX, the conference in Stuttgart, there was a presentation from the Unreal Engine, and they had a pretty much good PC, and they had a new project for real-time, rendering, something like that, and the machine was crying. Really, it was very loud. So for everything, definitely you need to have a better computer. Thanks a lot for sharing your presentation, your knowledge. Definitely it was a pleasure, because I have followed your channel, and in the link in the chat I have placed the link. I will now copy and paste it again. So definitely subscribe there. Yeah, kitchen name, there is the contacts on the social media. So follow Roland, and it will be great to see the amazing videos, and I have learned so many amazing tricks there, and apparently the new updates from the Autodesk Maya. So thanks, Roland.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I can't see you. I only see myself and wave at myself. But I'm glad that you've been here and that you obviously liked it, telling from your comments. Thank you very much.
We're going to have a break and we're going to end the stream. So give us 30 seconds.